evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's live stream. I'm joined by our Deputy Leader, Phil Holden. Welcome, Phil.
Good evening to you, Richard.
And we've got another guest or two joining us as well later on. Ewan Morris has been doing some research in a particular area, so I'll be hearing from Ewan. And Andy Brady, our candidate in the Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse by-election, is supposed to be joining us. He's got a sore throat, so I think he'd lost his voice earlier on. So he might be joining us if he's able to say anything. Otherwise, he might just come on and we can just see him. But we'll see. So Andy maybe will come along. We shall see. But there's so many things to talk about this week. Loads and loads and loads. So where do we start? Just say, Phil, it's looking you're looking quite stylish there. It looks like some picture of Shutterstock. All the subtle colours there.
Yeah. No, I've just thrown a light on in the background. So I've got a little daylight style light that I've put on.
But I see your trusty easel in the background as well, your whiteboard.
Oh, my easel, yes, for being out on the street. Yeah.
Were you out last week on Thursday?
I wasn't out last week on Thursday. So I've been away quite a bit. So I've been in Barcelona. I've been in China. I've been in Vienna. So, and I've not been on Twitter much, not been on YouTube that much. So you can fill me in with what's happening, and I'll
were they work trips? I know China was a family trip, but were they?
Yeah, China was a family trip, and Barcelona was a family trip too, or not seeing family, just going on holiday there, and then went out to a sort of mission conference in Vienna, and that was very good.
Okay. I went to Barcelona on a school trip and became ill there. I was ill for about 3 weeks after. It was terrible. I haven't been back since.
Yeah.
Maybe I will. Right, let's have a look at some of the things that have been going on. Right, that's just something to mention in passing while we're warming up. Scottish GPs warns over reliance on popular weight loss drugs. Some people are recommending that the NHS prescribes weight loss drugs on a massive scale. So people who are obese, overweight, whatever, can take injections that takes away their appetite. That's the way it works, and apparently these are quite effective. Apparently, safe side effects. So people are suggesting they be prescribed en masse. I mean, my feeling is somehow or other, this will go wrong. I mean, one reason is, will people? Yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
We don't know the long-term effects of them in terms of the effects over a lifetime. And there's a number of people who have their worries about these drugs, basically, and the ways that they work. I've not looked into it deeply. But I think one thing that RFK said in the States was that they could buy gym membership for the entire population of the United States for the price of, prescribing these pills, basically. Or something along those lines. Or maybe supply them with like organic food or something like that, for a similar price. So these are expensive drugs, and that I don't know if they're particularly overpriced in the States and they're cheaper over here, but these are expensive kind of diet drugs, and they work by inhibiting the body from doing what it's meant to do with food.
Yeah. I mean, would you think that some people might think, oh, well, I'm just going to have a total binge and I'll get overweight, but then I'll just take the drug for a while and get back in shape?
Yeah, I'm not totally sure how the drug works, in that if it causes you to lose your appetite, presumably it doesn't.
It takes away appetite. Yeah, it makes you feel full more sooner. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, that's what I would imagine. It would produce some sort of recklessness and then reliance on the drug to sort out the problem later.
It doesn't inhibit the absorption of food. Do you know?
No, it's appetite.
Okay.
It takes away appetite. Yeah, so it's one of those things where just one way or another, I'm not comfortable about it. I'm not quite sure how it's going to go wrong, but I've just got a feeling that one way or another it is, because it's bypassing what should be a matter of like self-control, personal responsibility. And yeah. So, what's going on there? Right. Let's see what else we've got. Just a quick review of things we're looking at in the week. There's the new prostitution bill appeared in the Scottish Parliament. I made a video about it that about 6 people have watched. Well, maybe a few more than that.
But I've not seen it yet, so
I think it must have a bad word in it.
Yeah,
it's really difficult for us on YouTube because one time you want to make a video about, I'm not going to say the bad word, assisted dying, and at some point I might use the actual correct word for what assisted dying really is, and as soon as you use that word, then your reach on YouTube goes down. Similarly on this topic as well, do the words not reach? Yeah. Anyway, so it's a very important bill in the Scottish Parliament, brought forward by Ash Regan, and it's basically to criminalise the buying of sex. It's coming from a feminist angle. The idea is it's the men who buy the sex, it's the men who are bad, so we'll make the men criminals. The women who are prostitutes or choose to be prostitutes in some case or want to be, then what they're doing will be completely decriminalised. So at the moment, soliciting in the street is illegal, but this bill would make it legal. And so the woman standing there, obviously inviting men to buy sex from her, she wouldn't be breaking the law. But the man who does actually buy sex from her would be breaking the law. So I think overall, as I say, it's driven by feminist principle. Would it be better than the current situation? Yes, but it's still very, very flawed. So if you're interested in that, which I think you probably should be, it's an important bill coming forward. Do have a look at the video I made this week.
And I think the basis that Ash Regan is saying is that selling sex is always a form of violence. Is that?
Yes. Yeah. This is the sort of nonsense
angle on it. Yeah. So it's sort of like we probably appreciate the effect that this bill would have in some ways, but the reasoning behind it is completely flawed.
Yeah. It's not just violence, it's violence against women and girls. It's a form of violence against women and girls, even though a significant number of prostitutes are men.
Yeah.
Everything has to be seen through the gender angle. So basically,
what's the angle that this bill has on male prostitution? Presumably, does that make it completely legal in every?
Yes. So it would cover male prostitution, but all the reasoning behind it is from a gender perspective. Yeah. It's like women are the prostitutes, men are the people who abuse them. But to call it violence, I mean, there are cases of coercion. There are many cases of coercion, all sorts of problems with prostitution,
that
which
would
is why we're dead against
all sex is violence, wouldn't they?
Yeah. But the idea, the illustration I used in the video, like if the female university student decides she wants to finance her studies by being paid for sex with an older man, which does happen. I mean, this is, some young women make this choice, and then to say that they're being abused by the man or the man's been violent, I mean, it's just nonsense. So it's very. I also said in the video, there's some Christian organizations who said, we're right behind this. This is really great. This bill's been brought forward. And I said in the video, I hope they're taking a nuanced view. I saw the Evangelical Alliance have put something on social media. I saw earlier today just saying this is great. We agree with this bill. And no, that's not right. They should be able to see, at the very least, they should be able to see that decriminalizing soliciting and brothel keeping as well, that this is not a good thing. I mean,
if you were in the Parliament, how would you vote on such a bill?
I addressed that very issue at the end of the video. Okay. I would try and amend it. I'll bring forward amendments.
Yeah.
But failing that, would I vote for it?
Amendments for the second reading. Yeah.
I would vote for it because the improvement of criminalizing the buying of sex, that will be a big game. I mean, like legalizing soliciting. I mean, it's hard to say how it's going to work out. I mean, how could you imagine the cases? So let's say, for example, a prostitute, let's say, in a hotel bar, seduces a man, and somewhere down the line reveals that she's expecting the man to pay, and he decides he does, and then somehow or other this ends up in court. So who's the witness going to be? The witness is going to be the prostitute. So she'll stand there. She is a woman. So she'll stand there in court. She'll say, I seduced him. I explained I wanted him to pay for sex. He agreed. And so that's what we did, my lord. So it's right. Thank you, witness. Very good. Okay, off you go. You can go on with your day. And man, right, you're convicted. You've committed a crime. I mean, what a crazy situation that would be. But that's where we're heading with this bill. It's very, very strange. But will it be challenged from that perspective at all in the Parliament? My guess would be no. No one will bring up this issue at all. Okay, let's move on. Appreciate the thoughtful. Thank you. I appreciate that. I thought about prostitution quite a lot as an issue because I did a debate about it years ago before the Family Party with Rhoda Grant, the Labour MSP, who was taking this sort of feminist line. And the other two people in the debate were actually prostitutes. And it was a very interesting debate. One of them, her name was Laura Lee, and she was saying, you know, I want to be a prostitute. It's all fine. I like it. It's the work I want. It doesn't do me any harm. And unfortunately, within a few years of that debate, it was reported on the news that she died. I have no idea what the issue was. But basically, when she was saying, you know, it's not doing me any harm, I didn't believe it. And the other thing as well, Laura Lee was in the debate. She brought her daughter with her to the debate. Her daughter was maybe, I don't know, I'm guessing, my memories may be a bit vague on this. It was just maybe about 9 or 10. And she was sitting in the audience in the debate, hearing her mum argue that prostitution was a perfectly valid way to earn a living. So, yeah, I did a lot of research into it in those days, including the lines like, people they say, oh, it's just like any other work. Okay, so we have a prostitution stall at the school careers fair, do we?
Well, they did have it in the job centre, didn't they? They had a case in the job centre where the strip bars had put up adverts.
Okay.
And you're, I think, you sort of like forced to entertain work that you could do potentially as well. You know,
that's the other question with it. Yeah, I mean, you lose benefits for refusing a job in the brothel.
But yeah, so people complained, and the advert was taken down, and the strip bars basically sued and said, "Look, this is valid work. You can't take that advert down."
Yeah.
And now the strip bars have been closed, but I think maybe there's been a challenge on that in Edinburgh.
Basically, brothels and strip clubs in Edinburgh used to run illegally because Edinburgh City Council decided they were going to turn a blind eye to them.
Okay.
And the police went along with that. But then when the police became Police Scotland, they took a uniform approach across Scotland. And that saw off. And most of the brothel strip clubs, I think there might be a couple still operating. It's not quite clear. But I think there might be some still operating. Not quite certain about that. If you think about, the Harvey Weinstein type story, I mean, if prostitution is a perfectly valid form of work, then a film producer should say, right, I've got a job. You can be an actress starring in my film. We'll pay you $1 million. And you have to come and do the acting, and you also have to have sex with me. That's the deal. Is that okay? Because if prostitution is legal, I mean, why not? Why not add that to contracts for other types of work? I don't think anyone would say, yeah, that's fair enough. So that's issue. That issue. Let's move on. This was quite nice. Texas House. That's a legislature or some sort of, I don't know, the elected assembly in Texas approves a pro-life monument to remember victims of abortion. I mean, that's quite a remarkable thing to do. So that was nice to see. Now, this is an interesting issue. I started doing a bit of research for Pride 2025 in Edinburgh in particular. So I had a look at their website, and I looked at their brochure from last year. It's got last year's brochure. And these are the organizations that had a stall at it. Now, the one I particularly want to point out, the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service, which, to clarify, is the government agency that determines which cases will go to court, basically. So of all the government agencies, that's one of the most critical, that they are seen to be utterly neutral in every possible regard. If there's the faintest suspicion that the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service have got some sort of bias, in them, then that really undermines the credibility of the legal system. So they're going to have a stall at Edinburgh Pride. How about that?
And that's for last year, basically, you're saying? Or
that's last year, yeah.
Yeah.
But needless to say, we're going to check to see if they have one this year. If they do, I think it might be worth going along and having a chat with them, just to see what they think about these points. I mean, similarly for other things, like the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. Is it not important that they're seen as neutral on things? I mean, Police Scotland, needless to say.
The Fire and Rescue, less so than the Crown Prosecution Office, or
I think the Crown Office, that's the worst. That is really clueless that they can't see that they shouldn't be doing this. It's staggering, absolutely staggering. But if they're there this year, it'll be interesting to see what they've got to say. I mean, Historic Environment Scotland. I'm a customer of theirs. I'm a member of, is it still called Historic Scotland? Where you pay your money and get into castles for nothing. So I'm their customer, and yes, that's interesting. So we're keeping an eye on that. Watch developments through June. We'll see how that story develops. I was staggered to see them on the list. When I just read through that list, I almost couldn't believe my eyes that they've been there. I mean, what conversations do they have with people? What are they giving out on this stall? What are they saying to people who come up to it? It's just, they would probably claim, well, maybe, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, maybe they would claim that there is an employer and they want people to know that everyone's welcome to come and work at the Crown Office. Maybe they would claim it was something along those lines, but no thanks. Right, moving swiftly on. This is an interesting one. This is from The Spectator that they picked up. I mean, Reform UK have been great promoters of proportional representation, because as I'm talking about a year or two ago, as a small party, the UK electoral system didn't do them any favors. They'd always complain they got 14% of the votes and 0% of the seats. We want proportional representation. That was really one of their core demands. Now they're leading the polls and they're benefiting from it. They've dropped it. They're not asking for it anymore. I mean, it's pretty unprincipled, really, isn't it? That you're all for something when it suits you, then when it doesn't suit you, you forget about it. And maybe that's the destiny of Britain, because the parliament elected will always have been elected through the current first past the post system. So it would be a bit turkeys voting for Christmas. But, interesting. Any thoughts about proportional representation, Phil? I would just have full proportional representation.
Yeah, I think it would be a generally good thing at the moment. And if democracy is representative, then proportional representation makes sense to me.
Yeah. I would say if there's proportional representation in Scotland, I think I would be an MSP now. Because our vote in the 2021 election wasn't too far off what you'd need to get an MSP. But if we had full proportional representation, more people would have voted for us, I think. So I think we'd have got those extra, I don't know, a couple of thousand votes or whatever, that would have got me in as an MSP. So I certainly think that's an excellent argument in favour of proportional representation. And this is another interesting thing on the reform front. Nigel Farage, today or yesterday, he said that Reform wants to introduce up to £5,000 transferable tax allowance for exactly the same reasons we say. So if a family wants, for example, mum to be at home with the kids, they want to make that choice more viable, so they would introduce £5,000 of transferable tax allowance for married couples when they could afford it. So it's not like a definite promise like the other things. It's somewhere down the road, and it's only £5,000. It's not the full transferable allowance like we would do. So that was interesting. And he said part of the reason was, we need people to have more kids. So I'd say, yeah, fair enough. That's a reasonable policy, but I think it needs to go up the priorities, because he'd also said it's going to restore the winter fuel payments, which personally, I mean, the family party hasn't formed a policy on that. Personally, in general, I think a lot of older people are pretty well off, and a lot of older people don't need the winter fuel payments. And I think generally, I think older people are better off, and often it's younger families trying to afford a house. Property prices are very high. They're the ones who are finding things a bit more difficult, and they're the ones who often can't afford to have as many children as they would like to. So I think a bit of redistribution in that direction would be no bad thing. But Reform are not really biting the bullet with that. I think restoring the winter fuel payments is a political easy win for them. So they're going for that one. And then the transferable tax allowance, then that's a bit more of a maybe if you can afford it at some stage.
I think, what's very difficult is that, older people are much more likely to vote. And so they're getting a lot of benefits, and as a party, the people that vote for us is probably skewed towards older people. But demographically, what's happening for young people is terrible, in terms of, that they are paying for pensions that it looks like there's not going to be money there for them when it comes for their time to drawing a pension, because the people that work today that pay the money for the people drawing the pension today. And you look at the demographics and it's like these people are paying hefty taxes, which are going straight into paying for, the care of elderly people and things like that. When you can see that pot is going to be empty for them. And money is being borrowed for this as well to pensions, the amount they've risen is, crazy in terms of sustainability. So just such a serious situation, and every government has just basically said, well, this isn't going to blow up in the next 5 years, so we're just going to keep paying and keep increasing it.
Do you think it's the case? I've been wondering this recently, that basically for the UK as a whole, whoever gets in as the government is basically going to be hugely unpopular because there's no easy answers to things. And basically, the electorate a little bit indulged, maybe a little bit infantilized, just to think they can have whatever they want, and it's the government's job to give it to them. I mean, is it an impossible job now
by
to be a popular
you
UK
give
government?
People what they want, but another generation has to pay for it. And that's one of the big issues I think that we're seeing with democracy, is that you can do that. You can promise people stuff with borrowed money, and it's someone else who's going to have to pay the price for it.
I mean, the borrowing's running out there. I mean,
it's running out, but it hasn't run out yet. It hasn't run its we are storing up problems for ourselves in the future, and it's another generation that has to pick up the can. And the idea that every pensioner is entitled to free fuel is silly, I think. I think it makes sense to means test, even though it's probably difficult to do well. I mean, that's the argument against means testing, is that it's hard to administer. But
but I can imagine if Reform get in the next election, I can imagine the same thing happening to them as has happened to Labour. Just becoming instantly extremely unpopular because they basically, the circle can't be squared. Just things are in a mess, and whoever's seen to be responsible for it. Anyway,
the real issue is bring down the price of fuel. That's the thing that's going to affect everybody. And that's because we're subsidizing so many kind of green things with our fuel. Our fuels, when you rank it in the world and when you rank it in Europe, we're so close to the top, I think, of most expensive fuel.
Needs fixing. Right, on the same topic, Nigel Farage also spoke about abortion. Now, the thought went through my mind, why is he talking about transferable tax allowances and supporting families and abortion? I thought, is this the by-election? As someone just said to him, Yeah, we want to make sure that we get the votes off people who might have otherwise voted for the family party. The thought crossed my mind, but then I don't think that's the case because he was answering questions. It was other people bringing the issues up. But here he is on abortion. I might need to skip through a bit to actually get to the abortion bit. So, right, here we go.
Just on the detail of what you're announcing.
Your desire to open up a debate on stricter restrictions on abortion. Can I ask your view? Do you think that the abortion time limit should come down? Do you think there should be larger buffer zones around abortion clinics? What do you think about this issue?
Look, I think all of these things, like assisted dying debate, which is going to come back again on June the 13th, I think issues around this, issues around abortion, I genuinely believe these are issues of personal conscience. I am pro-choice, but I think it's ludicrous, utterly ludicrous, that we can allow abortion up to 24 weeks, and yet if a child is born prematurely at 22 weeks, your local hospital will move heaven and earth and probably succeed in that child surviving and going on and living a normal life. So I believe there is an inconsistency in the law. I believe it's totally out of date, but I do believe, I wouldn't particularly want anyone around me to agree with that or disagree with that. I'd leave it up to them. I think our current situation on this is irrational.
How about that? The first thing I would say is when he says he doesn't want anyone else to agree with him, I just think that just doesn't make sense. It's like saying, this is really wrong. This is absolutely wrong. But I really don't care. If you think differently, if you wanted to carry on, couldn't give a monkeys, but I think it's absolutely wrong. And how? What? It just doesn't make any sense to say that.
So, yeah, I think he knows it's an issue that could split his party, and so it's sort of like in order to maintain the party at that size, that's what he's going to say, And do
you think the whole thing he's saying there? I suppose if we've been cynical, we could say he wants to get pro-life people voting reform or to keep pro-life people voting reform, but he obviously can't come out as being pro-life. So this is a compromise where he can give people enough to make them think, he's the one who at least is doing something. So is that a strategy or is that his genuine belief? Difficult to know.
I wouldn't necessarily say that it's not his genuine belief. Like I think there's a rationale there that makes sense what he's putting forward. It doesn't make sense to me in terms of like being the right approach to it, but there's certainly an argument there that says, look, the baby can live if it's outside the womb.
The child,
viable.
Usually with child, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's he's arguing from that perspective, and even people that are pro-choice would maybe use the word child in some places if they've not been fully steeped in the correct language for it, So, yeah, I think he might be genuine in saying he believes in that argument that if a child is viable, then you shouldn't be killing it. Obviously, my position is it's alive, and at every stage, that's a human life. And I think that's what we've seen with assisted dying, that basically the sanctity of life has been taken away. Saying that life is something special, life is something valuable. And I'm sure that will open up wider, that you look at ancient times and they thought that, killing people was a sport and things like that, And I think that we'd end up with some sort of death penalty back, where we say, look, our prisons are full, we're struggling to deal with this. We've got various serious criminals who will never get out, that basically being a life prisoner is essentially a death sentence. Why are we keeping these people in our prisons, paying all this money for them when they'll never get out? Kind of thing.
I think the viability arguments, you can see what people are making of it, but I think morally, it doesn't bear any sort of scrutiny at all. But we don't apply the same sort of arguments to any other type of people, that their lives become, it's okay to kill them once they're reliant.
Dying is about viability, isn't it? You basically say that this, you can kill this person because their life is not viable beyond 6 months or something like that. That's the argument that they're making. But why 6 months?
Yeah.
None of us are viable long term.
But the fundamental thing you said, there's a matter of conscience. In other words, it's a matter of what's right and wrong. Then it speaks in quite powerful terms about it. But in politics, when it's said it's a matter of conscience, what that means is we really don't care. Our party doesn't care which way this vote goes. I just think it's like saying that this is a matter of what's right and wrong. So it doesn't matter what the outcome is. So we don't mind.
I think you can say there's issues of conscience and things like that within, so one of the things would be like in the wars where you have conscription, and I think the person that I'm named after, another Philip Holden, he in the war was a medic, and his job, he said, like, I'm not going to kill people, but I'm happy to run in the front line, carrying a stretcher and pulling people off the battlefield, and getting them fixed up, and that was an issue of conscience there. And
I think that's a different use of it. That's saying that people can opt out of things that they think are wrong. I think that's a different use of it. But saying if you're in the parliament, the decision-making body, deciding what the law is going to be on a critical moral issue, I think the fact that it's a critical moral issue means that you can't say you don't mind what other people think.
And parties are forced to do that, like whether we're in Europe or out of Europe, or and so the Conservatives decided that wasn't an important issue for them, and that they weren't going to take a side on it. Issue of say conscience or whatever, but basically they didn't have a side on that, and for us, we don't on independence,
but we don't say it's a matter of content. It's a matter of critical moral import. But we don't care. You can think what you like.
I think for the SNP, they would see it as a moral
they would,
issue,
and they're wrong. And the same for unionism as well.
Yeah.
I'm just going to experiment with something. StreamYard's got a new feature that I was going to turn on before we started, and it's one where the comments come up automatically up the right-hand side of the screen. I'm going to test it. So it may be that they will obliterate Phil, or it may be that it deals with it. Well, let's give it a try, shall we? Like Phil obliterates them. Let's see. Okay, keep the comments coming in. Maybe they'll come up below Phil. Let's have a look. Right, what else have we got going on? We need to. Let's have a quick look at the family party meetings coming up, and then we'll bring on Ewan. Right, so tomorrow night in Livingston, as usual in the Wetherspoons are council proof. 7 o'clock. What's it called? The something field, the harvest. No, I can't remember what it's called. The something field. Anyway, you can see the details on our social media. Hamilton on Saturday, 11 till 3 on Quarry Street, the High Street. We're going to have a street stall campaigning for Andy Brady in the forthcoming by-election. So do come along for any of that time between 11 and 3. Quarry Road's the main high street in Falkirk. So do come, in Hamilton. So do come along if you can make that. Falkirk meeting, that's Monday next week as well. So it'd be great to see you there. All right, we've got some comments coming up now. Let's see how they... Right, I'll just introduce this issue, then we'll bring Ewan in to talk about it a bit more. Now, the Scottish Government's got this expert review group on abortion meeting, and it's basically a group composed of pro-abortion activists and employees and whatever. And we know what they're going to come up with. They're going to recommend decriminalisation of abortion. I mean, I would bet my house on it. So that's what they're going to recommend. And so it's interesting to see the media just starting laying the groundwork for this. So this was the STV last week. Women deserve better. Fresh attempts to decriminalise abortion. Decriminalisation would mean abolishing the time limits. It wouldn't necessarily mean that the NHS would perform abortions any any later. I don't see any reason why they wouldn't, but they might not. We don't really know. But what it would mean is if an individual like took abortion pills beyond the time limit, or tried to procure an abortion by whatever means, then they wouldn't be breaking the law. So so the comments coming up, that's not great, is they're quite small, aren't they? But yeah, keep the comments in. It's nice to see them there automatically. Right, so that was STB. I mean, the BBC are on the case as well. They're trying to lay the groundwork, and they've been doing this for ages. They will report cases. I mean, cases are quite rare, where basically a woman has taken abortion pills beyond the time limit, and the case is then presented as, how could the heartless police investigate this poor woman just because she might have taken some pills late? Whereas the story should be, how did she get the pills? How on earth did the NHS dish out these pills without proper consultation to check that the woman was entitled to them? So instead of going to what the real problem is, they say the law needs to change in order to protect these vulnerable women who are facing criminal investigations just because it looks like they might have broken the law, basically. So this was the one on the BBC. I think it was just yesterday. And now let's welcome Ewan. Oh, no, that's right. Ewan's there. I don't want to get rid of Ewan. I want to get rid of the picture. Right. Okay. So Ewan, fire away. Tell us about what really happened here compared to what the BBC reported.
So the BBC more or less reporting, I was listening to Radio 4, the File on 4, talked about it this evening. And the way they kind of painted it was that this poor lady had told, Mari Stopes about her pregnancy and said she was 6. They said she was 6 weeks, and she just unfortunately had a stillborn baby. And then they decided the cruel police came along and arrested her for it. And the way that they spun it was the headline kind of read, she was arrested at the height of the COVID pandemic, a day after delivering a stillborn baby at home, and whisked into custody in the back of a police van, still bleeding, having had surgery. Now, what actually happened is that this lady was in a relationship with two married people in what they would call a BDSM relationship. And she had gotten pregnant accidentally. And then she had told Mari Stopes that she was much earlier than she actually was. And I think it seems she knew that she was much further on. One of the other things she had done before she pursued her pills by post, she searched up terms like, is mifepristone, the pill, detectable? Is the abortion pill detectable UK? She searched up on her computer, if you late miscarry at home, what do you do with the fetus? And can the father take the miscarried fetus to the hospital to get rid of in the UK? And this was presented as evidence in the court case, and yet completely absent from the STV article, the BBC article, the Metro, all sorts of news articles that mentioned it. Also, she had then turned around and said in her interview, basically, she just said, well, it was just Google searches, you search up the worst case scenario, but I think it is quite telling. And this case is being used to bat people over the head and say, look at this poor lady, this is why we need to decriminalize all abortions,
How did you find this out?
Well, SPUC did a kind of deep dive into it back in April, where they had reported on what was talked about at the trial. And they are the only news article, they've got the only news article in the news source that actually reported on this kind of, I would say, quite important part of the case. Every single other news organization seemed to drop this very conveniently.
Yeah, the sound and picture is quite out of sync with you. Yeah. We can hear you perfectly well. It's just you carry on talking for a few seconds after you've stopped. It's fine. We can hear you. I mean, so as media behavior, how would you categorize that?
Well, I think it's very biased. I would say it's quite, the BBC is meant to take an unbiased view of these things, and yet they are completely omitting rather important facts. And it's very clear it's part of an agenda. I mean, this Stella Creasy bill has been introduced to decriminalise, and they're working on it. So very clearly there's a media attempt to try and kind of push decriminalisation.
Yeah. And that article there in the BBC, when you listen to the recording, it's like leaked recording shows, and it's the blandest conversation ever. There's no emotion in it or no drama in it at all. It's just like, someone being a bit unsure.
Yeah. I think, is bias a strong enough term?
Propaganda is like, that's what it is to me.
Yeah. I mean, to be deliberately missing out absolutely crucial elements of the story in order to spin your particular agenda at the critical time, at the time when they need to be doing that. I think that's pretty extreme. I mean, we know, the BBC, so we know they're biased, particularly on this issue, but I think this is a particularly extreme case there. Yeah, I mean, what can be done about it? I mean, I've complained to the BBC a couple of times about things that were absolutely clear cut. It wasn't anything subjective; it was absolutely clear cut. And now it goes through their various committees and they say, no, we can't see any problem. No, but that is pretty atrocious. Pretty atrocious. Yes, I wonder. I don't really follow what goes on in Westminster particularly closely, but I think they've kept doing this for years, haven't they? They keep, which you can do at Westminster, it seems. You tag something on to another bill. And so they keep taking a bill about one thing and try and amend it just to tag on, oh, and by the way, we'll decriminalise abortion as well. And if the amendment passes, and then people have either got to choose, they might want to vote for the bill for other reasons, but then if they do vote for it, then we've had a side order of decriminalising abortion.
And what bill's being amended? Is it vaguely related, or is it not related at all?
I know some of the others have been tagged onto have been totally unrelated.
Yeah.
But which one is it this time, Ewan?
It's the what was it? Some kind of health and well-being bill or something like that it was tacked onto for the bill.
Yeah, but this doesn't seem to happen in the Scottish Parliament. Thank goodness. It's a really atrocious way of making law, isn't it? So instead of having to bring forward a proper proposal and have it go through committees and scrutiny or whatever, you just tag it onto another bill and hope for the best.
Well, this is how the Americans work theirs. Every bill that goes through the American Congress is basically they entitle it like the American Freedom Act, and it will have 101 different ways to fund abortion, or 101 ways to fund anything that they can think of, or it could be paying for drag queen story hour or something like that. But they'll call it the amazing bill or the great American bill, and then they'll say, well, if you're not voting for that, you're not an American. So it seems very similar to that. It's a very American way of doing it.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Right. That was extremely helpful. I was going to talk about that, but I didn't have anything like that detail to put into it. But that's interesting. Right. That's an interesting comment. Is that not how slavery was abolished? By tagging it onto another bill. Possibly. I guess if you've got any sort of procedure in the Parliament that's not really the way things ought to operate, it enables things to happen through maybe almost like devious, sneaky means. Okay, it might be used for good occasionally, but I think overall, it's not what you want. That's not the way you want things to run. I'm saying it doesn't seem to happen in the Scottish Parliament. I'm not sure why that is, but this is good. Okay, that's interesting. Much better to watch on YouTube rather than Facebook. I don't know why that would be. Yeah, but there have been some problems with Facebook, actually, with it not playing properly. But anyway, let's see what other issues we've got here. Lots and lots. Why don't we go to... right, let's go to this. Right, a couple of things here. I mentioned last week on the live stream that there are some genuinely far-right activists in Scotland who are members of some parties that are far smaller than the Family Party, as far as I'm aware. But we've sometimes had these people appearing at our events or try to put themselves along us. But we've made it clear that we're really not on the same wavelength We don't really want to be associated in any way. But they've been doing the same with Reform during this by-election. This was one of their banners that was put up. It ended up reported. And on the live stream last week, I said, the way it was written, the way it was painted, it looked like something off Scooby-Doo. The baddie had written on Scooby-Doo. And then I was in Hamilton last Saturday on the high street, and lo and behold, I saw this. Sorry, I haven't got these in order properly. And then I saw this. So the person who made that banner had obviously watched the live stream. So for a joke, he took along a Scooby-Doo teddy bear to put next to it, which was quite amusing. I had a little chat to the gentleman. As I say, we're totally not on their wavelength. So my attitude, though, is to people, I will have a chat with anyone from any point of view. Hopefully, from my point of view, have a positive influence on them. Probably people from a lot of other parties would say, "Oh, you can't talk to those people. You can't talk to these people." No, I will have a chat to anyone who happens to be in the street, even the Greens, even if the Green Party are there, Scottish Socialists, anyone. I'll have a chat, but we certainly don't want to be associated with them. But I was just anyway quite amused to see Scooby-Doo there. Now, Ewan, I'm going to come to someone you know now. That's John Naples Campbell, who's the drag performing LGBT activist, cross-dressing head teacher at Kinloch Burvey High School. And I saw this on social media. I think it was yesterday, or it might have been earlier this morning. I can't remember. And someone had put this around saying, but basically they're saying, look, this is terrible. Drag show for 0 to 6-year-olds. This is totally wrong. Elgin Library, council property, and this is the head teacher of a high school. However this allowed. So I gave it a retweet, saying, basically, this is John Naples Campbell indulging his proclivity to cross-dress in front of a group of young children. He emailed saying he'd spoken to his lawyers. He always does that. He always complains and says he's speaking to lawyers, whatever, but he'll never debate. But then he also said that this picture is actually old. It's from a couple of years ago, and it's not happening this year. So I very happily published a correction and apology. And I said, very sorry, this is not coming up next month. John Naples Campbell indulged his proclivity to cross-dress in front of a group of very young children 2 years ago, rather than this year. So just a quick reminder of our last issue with him is as we became aware of a book in the school library there up in Kinloch Burvey High School. And the book, I've got a copy of it down there, it was absolutely atrocious, just attacked everything that's right and good and pure and decent, if you like, about sexuality. And we complained to him. He refused to remove the book. He moved it to the area for older children, but he refused to move it completely. We complained to Highland Council, sent them all the images. Highland Council said, no, that book's good. As far as we're concerned, it stays there. We complained to General Teaching Council of Scotland. I said, this head teacher is choosing to keep this book in his library and it's obscene. Please take action. General Teaching Council for Scotland said no. When Highland Council refused to do anything, we went to the Scottish Public Service Ombudsman and said, right, the council is failing to take action here. This book's obscene. It's been in the school library. And the Scottish Public Service Ombudsman said, well, basically, they don't care. They don't do it. I won't show these slides for long. Just a quick reminder of the images from this book that GTCS and Scottish Book Trust and Highland Council have all said they're basically quite happy for a head teacher to keep in their school. This is about sexual orientation in relation to a certain species. So basically, some people are sexually attracted to a certain species. I mean, it talks about polyamorous relationships. I mean, I don't even want to talk about it. I mean, there's all normalized to children in a school. So, yeah. So institutions like marriage should be questioned, not joined. I mean, how destructive a message is that for the young people who've got the misfortune to be in his school? So yeah, it's just a little encounter with John Naples Campbell again today. I mean, he will no doubt report this video for YouTube for being defamatory or whatever, but generally YouTube are pretty good, and they just ignore his complaints that he makes. It's interesting as well, because YouTube always send his emails to me as well, so I can see what he said. But yeah, we're still very concerned that he's serving as a head teacher in a school in Scotland. I mean, anything to add there to this?
Well, no, not really on this subject. I mean, I wasn't aware of Drag Queen Story Hour happening this year, because it's obviously in my local area. So, but it did go on the last 2 previous years, and the council kind of, let it go on. And for those people who don't know, that John, I think it's John Summers Campbell these days, he was my former drama teacher, so I know the man well. I don't wish him any ill will. I don't hold anything against him. I think some of the things that he does and a lot of the things that he promotes is very harmful, and I don't think he should be I don't think he should be a head teacher, really, with the kind of things that he promotes. No ill will against the man. But
I mean, Highland, you'd think Highland Council, there's lots of independent councillors. So you might think up in the Highlands, they're good traditional folk. They'd see this. Often it seems like the further you go out into rural areas, the crazier things become somehow. It's not the general population, but it seems like activists seem to be able to get a grip and throw their weight around in more rural areas for some reason. It's really, really quite bizarre. Do you want to answer that or not?
It was a rural high school in Morayshire, so I'll leave it at that. I better not name and shame. It is an awful school, so I better not.
Right.
I think
yeah, go on, Phil.
What maybe stands out to me is the Section 28 stuff. So basically, that whenever you have like an LGBT month or something like that, it's always saying like this was a landmark moment, getting rid of Section 28.
Yeah.
Now, when the sort of poll was held for that, it was 86.8% that wanted to keep Section 28.
This is Brian Souter's poll.
In Brian Souter's poll. And yes, there was a bit of an effort to boycott it by some people and things like that. But I think that the percentage of people that wanted to keep Section 28 was vast. And it was the politicians that, were doing away with it. And so, it wasn't representative of what the country was thinking.
No. And it always gets presented as you weren't allowed to talk about LGBT things. It was bad. But absolutely, I said you weren't allowed to promote
it, like we see here, and our policy is to bring Section 28 back, basically, isn't it? Not with that name, but
not with that name, but basically, that was what our policies would amount to there. Right, there's an interesting question. Farage would limit abortion, right? Let's just see how much you'd limit it by. Now, I was anticipating going to talk about that because the abortion figures for 2024 have just been published today. So sad to say, an increase. So 18,710. It's a 3% increase. It's a smaller increase than there's been in some of the years before, but still a substantial increase, so up to 18,710. So I had the sad job today of ordering another string of lights for our display, another 1,000 for that. A few on the other strings have stopped working, so I think we'll be about right with that. I'll come to that slide in a minute. This is the one that's interesting. So what would Nigel Farage like the time limit to be? It's current 24 weeks. Okay, what this chart shows, the purple bars, so the right-hand bar is 2024. So look at the rightmost bar, basically. So the purple, the big purple section, 79.2%, and that's abortions under 9 weeks. The sort of mid-purple lilac, or is that what you call it, section, that's 9 to 11 weeks. The bit above that is 12 to 17 weeks. And all the ones over 17 weeks, basically you can barely see them on the graph. So what would Nigel Farage like to change the limit to? I wonder. Because if it's saying it needs to go down to 20, then what difference is that going to make? Negligible. And also, in cases of disability, a lot of those ones at the higher gestation times, they will be in cases of disability as well. So if we did bring the time limit down to 20 weeks, it wouldn't affect disability. So the reduction in the number of abortions would be tiny. We might even be talking like a fraction of a percent would be the influence of that. So any suggestion that Nigel Farage's view, if it was put into action, because it's not reform policy, would have any meaningful impact on the number of abortions, I think that just is not the case. Okay. Right. Let's look at the. That's the rate per 1,000 women of abortions. So you can see that's going up. You can still see the jump when pills by post came in during the pandemic. That really caused a significant uptick. The abortion rates in Scotland are significantly lower than in England.
Yes.
As well. That's quite interesting. I think in England, this figure might be something like in the 20s in any case, maybe 25 or so. So quite significantly higher. It's interesting to look between the different areas. Islands, Scottish islands, their figure for this is something like 7.9 instead of 17.9 being the average. I think the highest was Dundee. So culture obviously plays a massive part in this. Then I just wanted to read this. Is it me, or does this not make any sense? See if you can make any sense of this. This is from the government's report published today. While termination service demand slowed overall, termination rates decreased for women living in the least deprived areas, and as a result, inequalities in termination rates by deprivation have increased. Right, while termination service demand has slowed overall.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So
It's increased.
there's been yeah, I mean, looking at the graph, it looked like the demand has grown overall.
Yeah.
But what they're saying is it decreased for women living in the least deprived areas. As a result, the inequality in termination rates by deprivation has increased. So because
yes, yeah, I get that bit.
well
That bit makes sense.
But the first line appears to be wrong in terms of.
I think what they're meaning is the acceleration of the increase in abortion. I think that's what they really mean.
Yeah,
is
the increase is slowed
by which it increases.
Yeah, this was from the summary of the. Yeah, I think basically that's a mistake in there. So that's those figures. Now, what other issues have we got? I think we've done those. Let's see what else we've got. We've talked about that. We've talked about those. The LGBT inclusive education. There's been government guidance published on this relatively recently. It wasn't very interesting because it just reaffirmed what we already knew. What this passage here makes clear, though, is that you cannot withdraw children from it. LGBT inclusive education means LGBT content in every subject at every stage from nursery all the way through school. And this section here makes it clear it would not be possible for the withdrawal request to be granted. So if your kid goes to a particular state school, because this applies to Catholic schools as well, LGBT inclusive education, this policy is universal, and virtually all independent schools, big independent schools in any case, will follow this policy. So it would not be possible for withdrawal requests to be granted. And that's the deliberate strategy. Put it in everything, then there's no avoiding it. And it makes it clear in the earlier section as well, parents or carers may have the option to withdraw their children from all or part of the planned sexual health education as part of RSHP. May have the option, because basically they ask the child and the child can overrule them. So with sex education, the parent can ask for the child to be withdrawn, but the child might overrule them. But LGBT inclusive education, there's no escape. There's no withdrawal option from that. So it's just a reminder I suppose. Oh, this was an interesting little event. I'll show you a little video of this first. Well, no, I suppose so. This is some trans activists who basically stormed and occupied the balcony of the Equality and Human Rights Commission in Glasgow. So I'd imagine that must have involved, one of them has been charged with assault, and a significant number of them have been arrested as well for being involved in this. So they forced their way in, some degree of violence involved in the office, made their way out onto the balcony, and then had their End Segregation, Trans Liberation sign there. And I'll show you what was also happening in the street.
Right, dear.
So you get the idea there. I think there's, maybe we have, well, I suppose we have. As I was about to say, maybe we haven't seen this side of the trans movement before. That's obviously not true. We have seen it aggressive, but maybe at the moment when they're feeling on the back foot a little bit, we're going to see more of this sort of very aggressive, violent even action by trans activists. We shall see. This wasn't very widely reported. I thought maybe it would have been a bigger story, but to see, say, trans activists behaving like this. But were you aware of that? Had you seen this story at all?
No, but I've not been on Twitter or.
Have you seen it, Ewan?
I'd seen it briefly pop up on TikTok of all places. I'd seen some clips of it being shared, but not anywhere mainstream, frankly.
Yeah. I think it was underreported. But there's a willingness to take quite extreme tactics. Whenever I see things like that, I always contrast it with the pro-life movement that's so mild and peaceful and unintimidated or whatever, and yet it's the pro-life movement that the government's out to get and thinks needs reining in. Okay, that was just an interesting little aside. I mentioned already, didn't I? Do join us on Saturday in Quarry Road in Hamilton, 11 till 3. We're going to have, I think we'll have a table. We'll certainly be giving leaflets out and chatting to people. Do come along. Talked about that. I haven't talked about that. Just continuing the issue about parents withdrawing children from things. There's a bill going through the Parliament now that basically takes away parents' rights to withdraw their children from religious education as well, which, I think is wrong. Parents should be able to choose about that study. But this is going through the Parliament without any opposition at all. It's part of a wider bill, and it's going through. So the bill would require schools to inform a child if their parents ask for them to be withdrawn from either or both of these. One of them is religious education. It also gives the child the chance to express their views. Where the child's views are different from the parents' views, that school would have to follow the child's wishes. There's children's rights in action. And no controversy in the Scottish Parliament at all. Right, what else? Right, let's see if there's anything. I'm going to do the thing I should do. I need to check the title to make sure we haven't missed anything. No, we haven't missed anything. Is there anything just quick to finish on? We can save some. This quick one just to mention. Remember Cammy Day, the Labour leader of Edinburgh City Council, stood down, I would say, in disgrace, having been found to have sent sexually suggestive messages to young male Ukrainian refugees in Edinburgh. So that was the end of him. I think he feels it's a bit hard done by. Does it affect the Labour vote in any way? No, I don't think so. Not at all. People still vote Labour, it seems. But now we've got a Lib Dem. I think there's an MP went over to Ukraine on some sort of mission to support Ukraine, and he similarly was sending sexual texts to, I think it was a translator that was helping him on that, or a Ukrainian translator, a woman that's helping him. I mean, just dear, oh dear. Well, how do we get these people? How do we get these people elected? Right, the Miriam Cates post. Okay, we'll do this, the very last one then. Let me find it. Yeah, this is talking about the cap on child benefit, basically. And she's saying that if you claim child benefit for 16 years, that's £56,000 over 16 years. Sorry, of universal credit. That's not child benefit. The child element of universal credit. But said the average lifetime tax contribution of a UK worker is about £900,000, or for a low-wage worker, about £460,000. In other words, the money spent supporting children is tiny compared to the payback through tax through their lifetime. And that's the message that's got to get through to the way the country's run. It's not even necessarily a moral message. It's just facing up to the facts that we really need children. The economy can't function. Society can't function without enough children. So we've got to prioritize it. And people who say things like, well, if people can't afford children, they shouldn't have them. Or if you have lots of kids, well, you should pay for them yourself. It's up to you. I can relate to that. I understand that. Normally that's would be maybe my natural sort of take on things. But with this issue, there are really critical factors, because the people who have children, the money they invest in those children, bringing those children up, that's effectively investing in the future of the nation. And things need to be balanced up so the people who make that investment are rewarded for it. At the moment, that's not particularly the case. And it's one of the reasons why people are choosing to not have children, not have as many children. And that's storing up very serious problems for the future. Just this quickly. Sorry, Ewan, let's get you back on the screen. Understand that those wishing to adopt foster are screaming for their opinion. Council is spending big to find suitable persons. Yes, there's a huge shortage for adopters and fosterers, particularly at certain ages. But again, looking at the Edinburgh Pride brochure, some adoption and fostering agencies, that's what they're targeting. I mean, in Edinburgh, I think it was in Glasgow as well, an adoption agency was going to gay nightclubs to recruit adopters and fosterers. I mean, what are they doing? What are they doing? But yeah, I think it's a very noble thing to do, adoption and fostering. Our policies reflect that as well. Right, Ewan, have got anything finally to chip in there before we?
Yeah, yes, I've got a wee quick one going back to the about this Lib Dem MP and this whole scandal about kind of sexual messages and things, tying it in with Ash Reagan's bill. I had read in a paper somewhere, an editorial, saying that Ash Reagan has names of MSPs who have paid for prostitutes.
Yeah, they always say this when a bill comes up, yeah.
Yeah, so allegedly she's heard names of people and she's got sources for this. I mean, am I inclined to believe it? I think it's a bit of, it's a bit opportunistic. She's trying to publicize this bill, but it is something to think about. Is there, are there a few names hanging out there? Is there a bit of blackmail maybe going on with this,
It's come up every time, because this was discussed. It's been debated in the Parliament a few times. Going back to the times of Alex Salmond, and it never went forward. The bill was never brought forward. And the prostitutes were always saying, we've got a list of names. And if you bring this bill forward, we're going to publicize this list of names. We're going to publish our customer list. And some people suggested this was the reason it was never advanced at that stage. I mean, as far as I'm aware, there's no legal reason for prostitutes to not reveal the names of their clients. It'd be very bad for business if they did, because it would make people very fearful to enter into those transactions. But we shall see. In fact, just very quickly before we finish, you might have seen this on social media, but let's just watch this.
Show where I perform tongue twisters in different languages. That's it in a nutshell, but on a kind of deeper level, it's also about, I guess, the gesture of meeting people through language, trying on different languages, trying on the musicality of different languages. There's a personal thing in it for me. It feels about celebrating diversity of personality, which feels like it's a reflection of my queerness.
That's from the Edinburgh Children's Festival, funded by the Scottish Government, Edinburgh Council, Creative Scotland. all the usual things. Looking at the program for this children's festival, so much of it seems like it's a gender fluid sort of approach in various ways. I mean, this was the thing that made it absolutely explicit, but a lot of it is about boys and girls, men and women, dressing up in, yeah, no, you wouldn't quite say cross-dressing, but you know what I mean. And it's again as though they've been given free rein to be promoting this, bringing this before children. And it's, the rot has really set in with that. I put that on social media saying, if you want to reflect your queerness, then don't do it with, a show for 6 to 12-year-olds at taxpayers' expense. But that's where we are. Right, right. Thanks everyone for your comments. I know they're quite small coming up. I could just about read them on my big screen here. We'll maybe try. It's probably worth having them there because they're not in the way. We can still see the other ones, so that's worth doing, I think. Right, so thanks for watching live and later on, watching the recording later. I'll see you next week. Thanks very much for coming on, Ewan. That was extremely interesting, what you found out about there. So see you all next week. Good night.